This guy is a liar and he's wrong. Welcome to the GOP House Speaker, which is Mike Johnson. So the Republicans have voted in a guy by the name of Mike Johnson. Now, for those of you that might not know who Mike Johnson is, I'm going to give you a little bit of history on who he is, because he is another MAGA right-wing buffoon who talks about his faith all the time and then brown noses Donald Trump. But it gets a lot worse than that. This guy voted to steal the 2020 election and disenfranchise millions of voters out there in this country. He's been saying time and time again that he wants to ban abortion nationwide. Now, anybody who has that thought, when we have hundreds of thousands of people out there, kids that are waiting to get adopted, and this guy wants to ban abortion throughout the entire country, is a right-wing radical. I think we all could probably agree on that. He opposed the legislation of same-sex marriage. What a shocker that a MAGA Republican is against the LGBT community. I don't think that should shock anybody at all. But in regards to what this guy has said on the House floor to kind of prove to you what a radical nut job this guy is, I'm going to play that for you. Here is Mike Johnson on the House floor talking about letting the people decide in the election when we were talking about impeachments during the Donald Trump impeachment period. Have a listen to what this nut job had to say then.
Members have called for removal based on a myriad of objections against this president. Representative Al Green of Texas filed a resolution in the House for impeachment after Trump called for players kneeling during the national anthem to be fired. I mean, come on. You don't like his political positions? Great, but you can't impeach a president because you don't like him. That's not how this system works. We're in a constitutional republic. There are rules here. There are standards. You don't get to make that decision. The voters in this country do. And we have an election coming up in about 11 months. Let the people decide.
Yeah, let the people decide. Yet this is the same guy who voted to steal the 2020 election. But he says, let the people decide. What a contradiction from his actual behavior and actions. So he's a liar. We know that for sure. And then he said Trump called out players for kneeling. Was against it. No, he called them sons of bitches. Okay, there's a difference between disagreeing with a professional athlete kneeling during the national anthem and being the president of the United States and calling them out and calling them sons of bitches. This guy is a liar and he's wrong. Welcome to the GOP House Speaker, which is Mike Johnson. This was what Mike Johnson had to say when it came to abortion and his radical views on that, because he is an alt-right Christian radical. Here's what he had to say about abortion on the House floor.
Roe v. Wade gave constitutional cover to the elective killing of unborn children in America, period. You think about the implications of that on the economy. We're all struggling here to cover the bases of Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid and all the rest. If we had all those able-bodied workers in the economy, we wouldn't be going upside down and toppling over like this. Listen,
the gentleman,
I will not yield. I will not. Roe was a terrible corruption of America's constitutional jurisprudence.
It's interesting because he's talking about corruption, yet he's brown-nosed Donald Trump for how many years now? This is a guy talking about the killing of babies, but yet if you actually look at Mike Johnson's voting record, he basically votes against every single bill that could help the American people, including young children. This guy voted against cheaper gas. He voted against cheaper insulin. He voted against child tax credits, but, cares a lot about the unborn child, right? The unborn baby. This guy voted against stimulus checks. He's voted against the Voting Rights Act. He voted against fighting domestic terrorism in the past. He's voted against keeping birth control. He voted against background checks. This guy's voted against baby formula. Do you remember when we had that baby formula shortage? And this guy, Mike Johnson, wants to call himself, all high and mighty, the good Christian. But we had that baby formula shortage, and then Democrats came up with a bill that would have immediately put baby formula back on the shelves. Guess who voted against it? Mike Johnson, MAGA Mike. He voted against it. He voted against veteran cancer care, but he calls himself pro-life. And, of course, he's voted constantly against gay marriage because, God forbid, two gay people, two men or two women, marry one another. It's just the end of the world when it comes to Mike Johnson, right? But he'd vote for a guy with kids with 3 wives who is a liable rapist. What does that say about Mike Johnson and his moral compass? He has none. He voted against upholding the election. That's a big one, ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to this guy. He has consistently voted against Ukraine aid. except for the very first aid bill. Now, he calls himself pro-life. I wouldn't call him pro-life. He's anti-abortion. He's a Christian radical, and he wants to ban abortion throughout the country if he had it his way. He also supported President Trump's 2017 executive order prohibiting immigration from 7 Muslim countries. If you're a Muslim, why would you want this guy to be the House Speaker? I'm just curious. He solidly voted with the GOP colleagues, very policy-driven guy. He's been a member of the Congress for 7 years or so, give or take. It's his 4th term. And he's endlessly voted and fought for Donald Trump. As his member of his legal defense team during both his impeachment hearings, he's one of the biggest Trump allies you could find, and that's why Donald Trump went on Truth Social praising him, because this guy has brown-nosed Donald Trump since the beginning, since he started to announce that he was running against Hillary Clinton in the 2016 elections. This guy has been right by his side wearing the Donald Trump knee pads. Make no mistake about it. He's a constitutional attorney, received his degree from Louisiana State University. His Christian faith seems to be more important to him than anything. He leads the prayers on the Hill. And I think this says it all about this guy. His mentor is Jim Jordan. He voted against certifying Biden's election, and I think that's really important here. Actively involved with the investigations into Biden and wants to bring forth justice for his crimes, even though there's no evidence that any crimes have been committed. But when it comes to Donald Trump, silence. Silence. He's won his congressional seat with the largest margin of victory in his region in more than 50 years, actually. And, it's incredible because Adam Kinzinger made a pretty important statement, I thought, on social media. He said yesterday, I remember Mike Johnson lobbying me to support this lawsuit claiming the election was stolen. And he says every reporter needs to remember this Trump ally lobbying fellow House Republicans to support this Texas lawsuit seeking to overturn the election. The House Speaker right now is a guy that did everything that he could to try to overturn the outcome of a free and fair election back in 2020. Yes, this is a staunch election denier. That's who Mike Johnson is, a man who is not capable of separating church and state. That's who's the House Speaker right now, ladies and gentlemen. You can't make this stuff up. Conference earlier today. And in this press conference, an ABC reporter, who I think is a very good one, asked him what I believe to be is a very fair, legitimate question. Asked him, did you try to overturn the outcome of the 2020 election? A very fair question to ask. Here's the question that was asked, and here's the response from the Republicans, because the people behind him, Liz Stefanik, we had Stefanik out there, Elise Stefanik out there, and we had other, people out there like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert. And then there's a woman there named Virginia Fox. We'll get to that, but I want you to hear the audio first. This is part of the press conference where, in my eyes, a very legitimate question is asked, and have a listen to this.
Mr. Johnson, you helped lead the efforts to overturn the 2020 election results. Will you
Next question.
Very legitimate question. Very fair question by this ABC reporter, which was, didn't you help lead the overturning or the opportunity that you thought to overturn the outcome of the 2020 election? And you hear Scalise, and by the way, very fair question, very legitimate, fair question that he should have answered. And when you're a member of public, you hold public office, you should answer those questions. He doesn't because he's a coward. Make no mistake about it. Mike Johnson is a coward. But the lady that you heard in that video, who told the reporter to, quote, shut up, is the chair of the Education Committee. Her name is Virginia Fox. Virginia Fox, if you want to know a little bit about her, she voted for no aid for victims of Katrina, the lady who told an ABC reporter to shut up. Of course, she opposes abortion. If she had it her way, she would also want to ban abortion across the country. She seems to be against any LGBT bill that comes forward. She opposed the Matthew Shepard bill. If you remember, Matthew Shepard, a gay man who was brutally murdered because he was gay. And she opposed a bill, basically a hate crime bill, that would be harder on people. I don't know if you can be, but to be harder on people that murder people or attack people because of the color of their skin or because of their sexuality. She opposed that. Why? Because she thinks being gay is a sin. And because she can't separate church from state like so many of these MAGA Republicans, she voted against it. She also voted against Don't Ask, Don't Tell, that bill as well. Why? Because she is anti-gay. and she is an ultra far-right MAGA Republican. But it's interesting, what makes this even worse is that you have a reporter. I don't think under any circumstances a politician during a press conference should be telling reporters to shut up, even if you don't like the question. But here's what's really interesting about this is this was a really good, fair question. This is a guy who's the next Speaker of the House, and this is a guy who voted against certifying the 2020 election and worked with Trump. Let's be honest. Mike Johnson's an election denier. That's who he is. So you have a reporter doing their due diligence, asking what I believe to be a very fair and reasonable question, which is, did you still support, what are your thoughts on, did you still support, the overturning of the 2020 election, your efforts to do so? And you have a bunch of morons on the right that are standing up there with him, a bunch of MAGA idiots, because that's what they are, booing this lady. A page from the Donald Trump playbook, right? Anytime a reporter asked a question that Donald Trump didn't like, or it was a question that put him in a corner, instead of facing the music and answering the question, Donald Trump would just attack that reporter. We know he did it with Jim Acosta and many other reporters for years, and quite frankly, he still does that. So what is this lady, the chair of the Education Committee, by the way, what a great example you're setting for kids, Virginia Fox, she tells the reporter to, quote, shut up. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the MAGA party, the MAGA Republican Party of the extremists in 2023. So now we have this guy who is the House Speaker for the GOP. And then it comes to Marjorie Taylor Greene, and I want to play that audio for you next, because Marjorie Taylor Greene didn't vote for Emmer. Now, Emmer, not a MAGA Republican. I wouldn't characterize him as such, and I think most people would agree with me on that. He's somebody who actually did certify the 2020 election. Even though I disagree with Emmer and I disagree with a lot of what he stands for, he's nowhere near far to the extreme as a guy that we have as the House Speaker today in Mike Johnson. And I find this interesting because Marjorie Taylor Greene didn't vote for Emmer because of a couple key issues, and we hear it right from the horse's mouth, so to speak, for lack of a better term. Listen to Marjorie Taylor Greene doing a live interview explaining why she didn't vote for Emmer to be the House Speaker. Have a listen to this.
But I couldn't support him for Speaker of the House. His voting record is what turned me. He had voted against President Trump's ban on transgenders in the military. He voted for the Democrats' gay marriage bill that opens up churches and other places for lawsuits if they use their faith and stand against it. He was for the national popular vote at one time, and that's not a movement I can support.
How much did Emmer's vote to certify the 2020 election have to do with the opposition against him?
Well, it played a big role for me. I voted to object, and I don't think that was a fair election. I think there was a lot of election fraud.
It's interesting here because she's basically saying that she did not vote for Emmer because he's not anti-gay. That's really what we're talking about here. Didn't support the ban that Trump was trying to pass on transgenders in the military, which is also hate against transgenders. She didn't vote for him because he certified the 2020 election. That's what these MAGA Republicans don't want. They don't want reasonable Republicans in office. Marjorie Taylor Greene, in her own words, saying she didn't vote for Emmer because he didn't vote for a ban on transgenders in the military, and he's not anti-gay, or at least not anti-gay enough that suits Marjorie Taylor Greene, and voted to certify the 2020 election because the ultra MAGAs in the Republican Party today want election deniers. The ultra MAGA Republicans in the party today want to make sure that they have a House Speaker that is anti-gay, anti-transgender, and anti-democracy. That's what the Republicans want in office today.